Live from Champion Studio in Charleston, South Carolina. It is better than ever live. Wherever you're watching, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or now LinkedIn, and whatever part of the country or whatever part of the world you're in, wherever you're listening, if you're listening to this as a podcast, whether it's at the gym or at work or driving home, wherever you're watching or wherever you're listening, I hope you're making today your masterpiece. My name's Dr. David Geyer, double board certified orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. I help you feel and perform your best regardless of age, injury, or medical condition. And some of the age and injury we're going to talk about today. We have a lot of good stuff to get to. We're going to talk about osteoarthritis and really arthritis in general, and some new treatments that are coming in down the pipeline. Some that are really available now, sort of quietly, but definitely some that are coming that may eliminate a huge percentage of hip and knee replacements. Really, really exciting. We're going to talk about having fun while you exercise and why that can be so important. In our weird story of the day, we're going to talk about why fit people, extremely fit people, tend to be heavier drinkers. They drink more alcohol. That is true. Maybe a little bit more. And if we have time, I'm going to answer some of your questions, read some of your comments about things we talk about today. Like I said, for the folks new to this show, especially if you're watching this on LinkedIn, this is the first time that I've gotten to do a show live on LinkedIn. It's previously just been Facebook and YouTube, and that's been great. But I was privileged enough when I applied to LinkedIn earlier this week. They actually accepted me on the first day. And I've heard from so many people that have applied and still haven't been approved to do live streams on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, thank you for joining us. Definitely tell people, come back every Tuesday and Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Hopefully you'll get a lot out of this. All right, like I said, a lot to get to. So let's get to the main topic that I want to talk about today, and that is osteoarthritis. This is a disease, and it truly is a disease. And this is what I know very well in my world of orthopedic surgery and sports medicine. 32.5 million people in the United States have osteoarthritis alone. That doesn't count rheumatoid arthritis and all other kinds of degenerative and inflammatory conditions of joints that lead to pain, lead to swelling, stiffness, and loss of mobility, quite honestly. Get this, the most recent data we have on surgeries comes from 2017. More than 754,000 knee replacements, more than 448,000 hip replacements done that year in the US. And I have a feeling it's way higher than that now, just 4 years later. At the hospital where I was before I recently changed positions, they did hip and knee replacements all day long, all the time. I mean, they were probably a huge percentage of that. This is a huge problem. And in the past, we've always looked at osteoarthritis as related to sports injuries when you're younger, young adult, maybe even teenager. And then there's some truth to that. We also think of it as a wear and tear problem, and there may be some truth to that. But what we're learning more and more is that osteoarthritis is largely related to inflammation and systemic inflammation. That's why in my new practice, which is more of a functional sports medicine practice, in addition to traditional sports medicine treatments, we focus on things, and me especially, on ways to decrease inflammation to help relieve that joint pain. We'll talk a little bit about that. But the key has always been, what can we do to prevent hip and knee replacements from that sort of an end-stage surgery? And the thought is this. Yes, you can go in, replace damaged cartilage, damaged bone, and put in metal and plastic. And it's done a tremendous amount of good for millions and millions of people in this country. But it's not perfect. You really don't get back to the same level of physical activities you were. You can do really well, there's no question. But long distance running every single day, it's a lot to ask with even the modern hip and knee replacements. And those surgeries are not benign. There are complications to that. People don't always do well, and very often they wear out. 15, 20, maybe 25 years tops. But if you're having to get that when you're 40, you're very likely going to outgrow that and need a much bigger revision surgery. So the question comes, how can we prevent that from happening. And that's what we really need to be focusing on in sports medicine and orthopedic surgery. And I get it. Surgeons make their money doing surgery. Why would we want to do something that prevents it? But we're talking about improving the quality of millions and millions of people's lives. And that's why you're seeing regenerative medicine clinics, stem cells, things like that. Stem cells are still trying to, find a place. The FDA still really hasn't approved them, and the literature, the scientific data on it's still a little over the map. We're getting better at it, but we still really don't have great ways to regrow cartilage. But we are working on it. And so there was a really, really fascinating article in the Wall Street Journal. I'd share it with you, but you have to have it's behind a paywall, so it's hard to get to. But it's really worth talking about. And they talk about places like MIT and Stanford where they have these researchers and who I'm assuming are biomedical engineers that are really taking the lead on finding treatments that not just treat osteoarthritis, but hopefully reverses. So let me talk about a few of the ones they mentioned. There was one at, where is this? This is the University of Maryland. A doctor used an experimental growth factor called sprifermin. I'm not sure how you say that, but it's a growth factor. And what it does is it stimulates chondrocytes, which are the precursor cells that make cartilage. And they gave people different amounts of it, gave some people a placebo. The people that got the highest dose of sprifermin, or I don't know how you say that, but they got the highest dose, they gained thickness of their articular cartilage compared to the placebo group that actually lost cartilage like you would expect. And nobody in the group that got the highest dose of that, nobody over the next 5 years ended up getting a knee replacement. So that certainly looks good. Another one, a drug called, I'm going to get this one wrong too, Loresivant. I wish they would just use like numbers and letters. That'd be a lot easier, like the peptides, BPC 157 or AOD 9607, instead of these drugs that nobody can pronounce. But anyway, Loresivant, I'm sure that's wrong. It's an injectable drug. It inhibits proteins that contribute to inflammation. Remember, we talked about systemic inflammation. That inhibit proteins that contribute to inflammation, cartilage degeneration, and the progression of osteoarthritis, and they promote the development of cartilage-forming cells. One injection, and what I didn't have access to the study, so I don't know if it's an injection into the knee or if it's like into the muscle, but among patients with moderate to severe osteoarthritis, Loresivant, one injection, improved pain, function, reduced their symptoms over the next 24 weeks, so 6 months. Which, yes, cortisone shots can make you feel better for a period of time, but there's tons of data showing that can actually do more harm in terms of cartilage breakdown, so it's certainly not a good long-term treatment. Another one out of MIT, they were focusing on ways to get insulin growth factor, IGF-1, into the cartilage cells. If you inject it or take it as a pill, it doesn't get into the cartilage cells of the knee. So they developed a way to use nanocarriers to get the insulin-like growth factor into the mesh that holds the cartilage cells together. Really cool. And then the last one, and I'll have to set this one up a little bit, is a take on the surgery microfracture. And I don't know if you've had a small area of cartilage degeneration. The articular cartilage is the smooth cartilage on the end of the bone. It's the white stuff on the end of the chicken bone, if you can picture that. And that's what breaks down in osteoarthritis. And you can have sort of a defect where you have a pothole, like if you consider potholes in pavement, and then you've got this hole where you have exposed bone. And we've been doing for decades now this surgery called microfracture. We use this fancy ice pick to poke holes in the bone, and the thought is that stimulates the formation of a type of cartilage called fibrocartilage. The problem is that's closer to bone than real articular cartilage. It's not smooth, it's very brittle, so that surgery, to be fair, hasn't done very well. But what the team at Stanford figured out, so they took the microfracture procedure, and this was done in mice, but what they figured out is that the stem cells on the end of the bone, the skeletal stem cells, they over a inflammatory process become new bone. But in that process, they go through a stage where they're cartilage first before they become bone. So what they did in mice is they did the microfracture, and then they used a protein, bone morphogenic protein 2, or as orthopedic surgeons call it, BMP2, and that stimulated those cells to create bone. But then they stopped those stem cells at the cartilage stage using something called VEGF. It's a type of growth factor. that's important in the bone formation process, but it stops it at the cartilage stage. And what they found is that doing that procedure, but using those proteins, basically the mice had more mobility, significantly less pain, better function. So I'm sure that's going to go into human trials soon. We have a long way to go with this. There is no question. But and this is some of the things that we talk about in my new practice, where we talk about all sorts of different non-surgical treatments for osteoarthritis and a number of things. And yes, there's stem cells out there, but there's really cool things with peptides like BPC 157, TB4 that are good for bone and joint pain. Peptides like AOD 9607 that have actually been shown to lead to thicker articular cartilage thickness. Exosomes, which are sort of like stem cells, but not exactly. Very, very early research, but looks very, very promising for osteoarthritis. I know it's not approved by the FDA. I get it. But these are things that are worth talking about if you've got early osteoarthritis, or if you haven't, maybe you've just had a bad sports injury, but arthritis hasn't set in. Maybe getting into some of these treatments early to try to prevent the development of osteoarthritis can be a really, really good thing. And there are some orthopedic surgeons across the country getting into this. Like I said, I am. And there's regenerative clinics across the country. Definitely something to look into. I'm actually, and I was hoping it would be ready today, but I've written an ebook called Better Recovery, and it's 18 sort of unconventional treatments for osteoarthritis and bone and joint pain. Should be out in the next few days. Hopefully my assistant Jen and I are working on the final design of it, and we'll get that out to you. And it shows and talks about some of the less conventional treatments. So there is a lot of hope out there for those of you worried or currently dealing with osteoarthritis. There may be hope for you coming. All right, then try to move a little quicker through these last few. Exercise is hard. There is no question. But if you can make it fun, it goes much, much better. And let me explain that. So first of all, there's sort of two ways to look at this. There's the beginner exerciser that's just trying to get through a workout. And if you can make it fun, you're much more likely to stick with it. There was a study at the University of Minnesota where they took a group of sedentary adults that didn't exercise at all. They had to do one moderate intensity workout and then do a questionnaire right after to talk about their mood. And then after that, they were said, hey, now you need to stay on a regular exercise program. Those that were in a better mood right after that one exercise program were much more likely to stick to exercise 6 months later and a year later. So there's something to this thing about having fun. But study after study after study shows that if you enjoy your exercise, even at a competitive level, like a high-level marathoner, your performance is going to be better. You'll push yourself a little bit harder, maybe a little faster, maybe get a couple extra pounds on whatever weight exercise you're doing. Your exercise, your sports performance will be much, much better if you're having fun. The question is, why? What is it about having fun with exercise that leads to that? And there's different theories. One is more of a self-mastery theory. People that like exercise and get good at it, they feel more in control, and then that makes it more enjoyable, and it becomes sort of this loop, this feedback loop that makes them a little bit better. There's another sort of frame of thought that exercise improves your exercise capacity, basically your ability to do exercise, and then as you're able to do more, you feel better while you're doing it, which leads to more exercise because it's fun, and it's this repetitive cycle. More capacity, it's easier, you feel better, and it's just this ongoing loop. And I am a huge, huge believer in whatever you have to do to make exercise fun. I haven't talked about this on social media before, but I have a huge, huge interest in behavioral science and behavioral economics. I've got hundreds and hundreds of books on it. I read it all the time. Actually going to be starting my work towards getting my master's in behavioral science, actually. And I think that this is part of it. It's how can we get people to exercise? And I've actually designed some programs, and if you're interested in learning how to start running, how to start lifting weights, how to start walking, anything to start you on an exercise process, I've got programs. I haven't launched them yet. I'm still trying to figure out if this is a good use of my time, but they're largely based on behavioral science principles to make you not just exercise, but continue to exercise. And one of the 10 or 12 keys to that is ways to make it fun. And so if you're interested in that, definitely touch base with me anywhere on social media, on my website. I can certainly launch that, but do what you can to make exercise fun. Now, like I said, the weird story of the day: why fitter people drink more alcohol. And this is crazy, right? Exercise is what I truly believe to be a keystone habit. Those of you, speaking of behavioral science, those of you who've read The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, he talks about a keystone habit, one habit that leads to a lot of subsequent habits in the same group. And I really believe exercise leads to a whole range of healthy behaviors. People who exercise tend to not smoke, they tend to eat healthier, all sorts of healthy behaviors. They sit less and are more active. We talked about sitting last time, but they do tend to drink more. Many studies have shown that. Now, you can argue maybe drinking is healthy, maybe it's unhealthy. I know the red wine folks talk about resveratrol and the cardiac benefits. I would argue that that's quite a bit overblown. I don't think there's nearly as much heart protective benefits of red wine as the red wine makers want you to think. I think there's benefits to resveratrol, but you'd be much better off taking a supplement. But having said that, I have no problem with a glass of red wine. And if you red wine makers out there want to argue with me, send me a few cases of your red wine and I'll test it and we'll see how it does as far as healthy behaviors. But here's the thing. There was a new study, Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise. The Cooper Institute in Dallas studied 38,000 healthy patients between the ages of 20 and 86. What they did is they got VO2 max tests on all these people, which is a way to measure. We do this in our office. It's a stationary bike test, and it measures your cardiorespiratory fitness. It shows you very quickly how good a shape you're in. But they did this to all these people and put them into one of 5 groups. One was low fitness, 2 that were, moderate fitness, and 2 that were high fitness. And then they asked them how much these people drank on a given week. And they considered 3 or few drinks per week. Basically, that was light drinkers, 3 and less per week. Up to 7 per week in women and up to 14 in men was considered moderate. Anything above that was healthy, or was heavy drinking, not healthy. All right, what they found: moderately and highly fit people were far more likely to become moderate or heavy drinkers than less fit people. Get this, if you were really fit and a woman, it doubled your odds of being a moderate to heavy drinker. All right, so the question is why? And again, back to behavioral science, there's this term that is used called the licensing effect. And basically it goes like this. If you do something good, you feel like you've earned the right to do something bad. And it may not be alcohol. If you do a hard workout, you deserve, a big scoop of peanut butter or chocolate ice cream or something like that. That's called the licensing effect. Not exactly a good thing always, but sometimes that's one of the things in one of my programs actually, but maybe not tons and tons of alcohol. But there's a newer theory out here that I think is really interesting. It comes from researchers at the University of Houston that feel that people who exercise a lot and people who drink a lot typically have similar brain circuitry, how they process dopamine is similar. And those people, both groups, tend to have higher levels of sensation seeking, pleasure seeking. And so they think that there's some sort of dopamine connection among exercisers that makes them want to drink more. I don't really know. I would just say I'm all for exercise, as I've talked about in the episodes of this show before. Just maybe keep it to 3 drinks a week or less. That would be my personal opinion. All right, and last, just a quick one I saw today that I want to get to, and that is a study about mental and physical health among couples in marriages, either healthy marriages, supportive marriages, or not so supportive marriages. And it's really interesting how they did this. The study just came out yesterday in the journal PLOS ONE. And what these researchers did, and I don't know that this necessarily extrapolates the way they hope it does, but they used married couples watching horror movies as a model for life stressors, couples stress. And what they found is the couples that held hands and remained close physically during the horror movie, they showed less signs of stress than those who didn't. And they, like I said, they extrapolated that out. Emotional and social support is the key to a healthy relationship. The lead author says, being in a supportive marital relationship is automatically and unconsciously helpful to our body's physiological stress response. But this isn't the first time we've figured this out. There's a ton of relationship research that talks about how supportive relationships are good for your health and well-being. Being in a supportive relationship, just some of the benefits, helps you respond better to stress, more resilient in adverse and tough situations, and you're better able to maintain your physical and mental well-being. So having said that, and I am no relationship expert, believe me, but do what you can if you're in an unhappy relationship, an unsupportive relationship, whether that's 6 months or 23 years, do what you can to be in a healthy, supportive relationship. And I say all the time, and again, not a life advice, life coach, certainly not a marital coach, but people talk about finding the right person. It's also about being the right person. So find someone that's supportive and loving and compassionate and everything, but also be that person for your partner. That will definitely improve your mental and physical health. I said I was going to have time to answer questions and do comments, and I promise I will do that here in the coming shows. I've got something I need to get to. But last thing, real quick, I want to say, I am so grateful that you give me the opportunity to talk. And I don't just mean on this live show, on everything I do. I started Twitter, Facebook in 2009. In August, about 2 weeks later, I launched my blog, drdavidgeyer.com. I still remember pushing publish on that first post. It was terrifying. But now 3,000 or so articles, videos, podcasts, newspaper columns, and then 3,000 plus media interviews. I'm so grateful. I just saw I'm about somewhere around 65,000 YouTube followers, and that's crazy. I know that's nothing. There's health people with millions. I get it. But just as an orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine specialist, and I really do care about helping you feel and perform your best, the fact that you watch all these videos, that you ask questions, and I know I can't get to all the questions I get weekly, whether it's through YouTube or my website or anywhere else, but it does mean a lot to me, and I do hope that I'm making at least a little bit of difference in your life. I have some things changing both with work and my personal life, so I'm freeing up more time to do more to help. I'm actually starting my next book, my second book. Those of you that don't have my first book, That's Gotta Hurt, The Injuries That Changed Sports Forever, back in 2017. Definitely get that Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere else. But starting another book, I'm gonna be doing some more sort of on-location videos about different treatments, maybe osteoarthritis treatments, but recovery treatments. Those should be really interesting. Maybe some more fun videos, definitely. And maybe more like this, where I answer more of your questions. I'm definitely looking forward to that. Thank you for joining me, not just this time, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, or podcast, but just anywhere. Reach out to me at any point. I may not be able to get back to you, but I'd love to hear from you. And with that, I will say, have a great rest of your week and weekend, and I will see you back here next Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Take care.